So we continue on. This one is a bit different than most that I talk about. I don't often talk about sex in cinema, but I do, because I do believe that clear dialogue and sexual um, understanding is absolutely necessary. Okay. And as I preface the other one when I talk about this, is that what I'm talking about is I don't put moral determiners on anything I say about sex in cinema. Okay, what's one person's cup of tea is definitely not someone else's. As long as you are not hurting someone, and I always state that if you are hurting someone, then it is wrong. But for the most part, the sex that you see in cinema is not doesn't fall under that umbrella. Even the bondage films that exist usually are not like that. They're not intending to hurt someone. They're intending to excite someone. They're intending to elicit pain in order to get pleasure out of it. Okay, they're not actually hurting someone, like beating the piss out of them. Okay, so this particular topic is why nurses and cheerleaders. Okay, when you look at like things that are popular in adult cinema, and by that I mean pornography, nurses and cheerleaders are oftentimes very, very high on the sort of costuming aspect of adult cinema. Okay, there are too many examples of nurse films to name, and there's too many examples of cheerleader films to name. Okay? But nurses and cheerleaders seem to be a very popular archetype. Well, why is that? Again, I'm going to be looking up some stuff on the web here as we're doing this because I do like to have clear views of things when I'm doing it. I don't know if there's any particular what's the word for it? Study done as to why nurses and cheerleaders are so incredibly popular in the sexual cinema or pornography. So I don't know if I can. I am going to give a couple of theories based on the research that I have done. But I'm trying to find. Excuse me. I'm trying to find the Kinsey Institute here. So just bear with me a moment here. Okay, here we go. I've just pulled it up here, so just bear with me. Now, again, the Kinsey Institute is at Indiana University. This is in particular why I would like to get to the point of why I do sexual research. It's because of the Kinsey Institute. They have inspired me to talk about it because I don't think it's talked about enough. That was just like in the movie Kinsey, which was a movie a while back now, but it is definitely something that is not talked about enough and not enough clear dialogue. So let me take a look at research. Let me see if they have any research on something. I'm sorry, on excuse me, nurses and cheerleaders. Mm-hmm. Hmm. All right, I'm sorry. I'm just getting a little lost in the research. I apologize if there was a long delay there. I was just looking to see if there was something specifically. I can ask, I can reach out to them and give you more statistics on it. But I'd like to give a couple of theories as to why it is nurses and cheerleaders. It's very common sense, and that's something that I think escapes people when they talk about sex. Like they just don't realize how common sense it is. Okay, when people engage in bondage activities, it's not because they're some kind of freak. Okay, it has nothing to do with that. It's that they enjoy pain and pleasure together because most of life outside of the arena of sex when you're an adult is mostly pain or boredom. Sitting in a boardroom is boring. Okay, trying to be married to someone for 15 years is boring and painful at the same time, right? But when they engage in this, what they're saying is basically, I want that pain to be reinterpreted into pleasure, all right? And there's many reasons why people engage in bondage besides that. Like a lot of like very wealthy men engage in it for the kind of reason is because they've been in charge of so many people for so long, they like to give up that power and have someone control them. Okay, that's like a basic theory of why bondage is so popular. But with nurses and cheerleaders, it's something different. Let's take nurses to start off with. Nurses are why nurses? Okay, well, one is that you have a war aspect to it. Okay, there is nothing, in my opinion, more romantic than going off to war, at least in the old days. Well, even now, because you have to get up, you have to leave your wife and your kids behind, and you have to go fight for your country. Okay, and that separation creates anxiety, but it also creates sexual tension, right? When you say goodbye, that's a very romantic gesture because you may not be coming back, but you're fighting for him or her, right? Whether it's a woman going off to war or a man. So that separation to do something noble is very romantic. It's very, very sexually driven. Whereas, because think of it in terms like this: if someone was supposed to go off to war, and the other partner was saying, no, please don't go, and then they said, okay, I won't. I'll figure out a way to get out of it. Now all of a sudden you have this. It's not as meaningful now because yeah, they're doing what you're saying, but it's not nearly as romantic as you two fleeing the country as them going off to war and coming back. So it's in there because when you fight in wars, you'll get injured sometimes, most times, all times, who knows? But there's definitely a potential for injury, and nurses take care of you. Now, nurses are particularly pegged as being female. Okay, so it's a female position anyway. But why is that different than the dental hygienist, right? Because dental hygienist is primarily female too. Well, one is that a nurse is taking care of you and taking care of your body, right? So there's this intrinsic thing that they're seeing you for all you are, and you're injured, you're a wounded soldier. They call it Nightingale syndrome, when a nurse falls in love with one of her patients. There's all kinds of things that go into that kind of, and we're getting into some very deep, mysterious territory as to what drives females to males, males to females, males to males, or females to females. But usually it's because the two are at opposite ends of a pole, right? There's a preclusion for masculine and there's a preclusion for feminine, right? And this doesn't mean that feminine has to be female or masculine has to be male. It just means that there are things that you do that are masculine: bravery, heroics, being strong. Those things are typically denoted as masculine, whereas feminine is soft, loving, caring, nurturing, things like that. Now, usually in a relationship, and I speak for myself, but I also speak for the relationships that I've seen. I have not seen a lot of research to back this up, so I could be wrong on this, but I don't think I am. Is that usually one side is masculine and one side is feminine. They usually in a successful long-term relationship, they're not that far apart. Okay, but in a friction relationship where sex is the key value, those poles are very far apart. All right, because masculine is masculine. I'm this. I'm strong. I'm this. I'm submissive. Now, again, that doesn't mean that that's female. I'm just saying that one's strong and one's the one that's following that one because they're strong for safety. Okay, so again, what you're finding, at least what I'm talking about here, is that these are the two opposite poles. The nurturer, the nurse. It's almost in the name, nurturing nurse. Whereas the warrior, the person that's injured, the dove, the wounded dove, the one that saved all the men but got shot to pieces and now is in the hospital. These are things that we denote as romantic for whatever particular reason, I don't know. But that is what we typically denote as romantic. So they're taking care of them, and of course we engage in like the idea of them falling in love because he is the warrior, she is the protector, the nurturer. So that's where those, I think that one comes from. I also think, to a large degree, that it's reverse roles, which is a huge part which people don't talk about a lot in sexual cinema or sexual politics in the household either, which is that people like to reverse roles sometimes. The man, when he, or excuse me, it's, keep in mind when I say male and female, I'm just using what is most likely, uh, society determines those roles. The man goes out and wins the bread. Okay, he comes home. The wife is home. She's there to care for him, nurture him, blah, blah, blah. That's what we typically think of in a 50s sitcom. Leave It to Beaver, whatever. Okay, it's kind of ingrained in the American zeitgeist, so to speak, as that's what we determine as roles. So there are many, many people, I am sure, that switch roles in the bedroom, where the man all of a sudden is a submissive and the woman is the dominant, where she takes charge and then he follows through because he's been leading all day. He had to lead 20 men in a business where it's very high pressure. So now he wants to take that role off and he wants the other one to do that for him, or vice versa. The woman leads out in the world, and when she comes home, she wants to be dominated by the man. So again, with nurses, all of a sudden now they're in charge. They say, take your shots, take your vitamins. How are you feeling? They're in charge, and the person has to be submissive because they want to get better, right? So there's a reversing role there too, that I think is very, very seductive for some people because it's behind closed doors. The nurse can't talk about the fact that you cried because you saw a guy get shot to pieces or whatever. So, there's that seductive aspect that he's telling you because he really does care about you and things of that nature. Again, when I say he, I don't necessarily mean just males. It could be she, too. It's just probably not as common. I don't think any of the research bears it out. And then we get to cheerleaders. Why cheerleaders? Well, that one should be very, very self-evident because it's when we first discover our sexual nature, right? When we're young, that's when we go through puberty. And when we go through puberty, we experience the first real glimpses of what it's like to be in a relationship. That's when males start to become more masculine and women or females start to become more feminine. Now, again, this is not exclusive, and they can change places. And I'm not putting a value judgment on if you are a man and you're feminine, or if you're a female and you're masculine. I don't care because I'm not your partner. I have specific preferences in my relationships that I like, and that's the way I like them. But when you're first experiencing this, you start to see the sexes change. Because when I was young, I wouldn't call it dating, but we would hold hands and recess or whatever, stuff like that. But all of a sudden, when we got into high school, now there was competition for girls, and in particular, cheerleaders are usually denoted for whatever particular reason as being the most sexually viable to males. So when you're going through the first stages of sexuality, that's the first thing that is introduced to you as like, this is the top female. She's the cheerleader. She's this. She's blah, blah, blah. She's a sexually viable female for you. So I think that a lot of people either have it from history of being maybe a football player or just whatever, where they were considered to be an alpha male and they were able to have cheerleaders, or those that did not and have that as sort of like a wish that they could have fulfilled. That's all. And I think that that's basically the long and the short of the cheerleader. Again, it's a lot of this is very simple if you just think about it. It's just most people don't want to think about it. And I think that's very sad. Like, I do. I think that is actually very, very sad. I think there should be more open dialogue about these types of things and why we believe them. Because when you take away the stigma of believing something, then you're taking away its power for you to have to hide in the dark about your beliefs. And that's perfectly acceptable. I don't think it makes sex worse. I think sex is just what it is. It's just sex. But the thing is that when you talk about why people believe things, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that you're soft or that you're too hard or whatever. It just means that that's what you like. And that's the great thing about sex, is that it's basically an infinite variety of things that change throughout time. What is cheerleader today may be something different tomorrow, and maybe the video game girl. I don't know, whatever it is. But usually, with cheerleaders, is because it's the alpha. So if there was an alpha female that changed places in high schools or whatever when puberty happens, then you would see that unfold. So whatever it may be. So again, this is just talking about it because it needs to be opened up, because people don't need to feel ashamed. That's the worst part about sex, is that because people don't talk about it, when people have desires for certain things, they feel ashamed. Okay, some of the media will point out you shouldn't like that because that's dealing with young girls. Okay, yes, no one's saying that it shouldn't be that is acceptable to view it in the frame of young girls. That's absolutely not acceptable if you are a grown person, or vice versa. The quarterback in there, it shouldn't be viewed from females as it being a young person. What it is it's the alpha. When they grew up, that was the person that was the alpha, and they longed to have that fulfilled, or they had it fulfilled, and they're looking back historically at what they were able to accomplish when they were in high school. That's all. It's again, there are things that can hurt people, and young people do not need to be engaged in sex with older people because that can hurt them. Does that make sense? Because they don't know how to deal with that type of life, and they have experiences that they need to grow in their own age with, and etc. So that's why those things are not acceptable, because you can damage someone's psyche doing that, whether it be a teacher that sleeps with a student, or whatever, an older man sleeping with a younger girl. Both are bad because those people do not have the criticisms of that to be able to make an informed decision, and that's why it's bad. And they can be psychologically hurt from that. And that's also something that needs to be brought up, is that wish fulfillment is completely different than basically destroying someone's life. Does that make sense? So cheerleaders, obviously there are rules in pornography that they have to be 18 and blah, 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 which is good, because that means that society has determined that they are of an age now where they can make their own decisions. They may not. But that's the arbitrary rule that is in place. Okay? But, that's why they do things that way, because they want to make sure that they are of an age, just like you have to be 21 to drink and blah, blah, blah. It's because we've determined statistically that most people are capable of making X decision by this time. So that's why we do it. So again, that's the importance of this, and I want to stress that, is that the wish fulfillment to have a fantasy about a nurse or a cheerleader is because of some type of idea that you've had that's probably a lot more subconscious than you think. So that's why you want to open up the dialogue, because you don't want people controlling how those things are said and done, because we have freedom of speech in this country, and we have it for a reason, because the country allows us to talk about things that may be controversial, that people may not like, that people may disagree with, but that's important. But there are always things in place that should be there for particular reasons, like making sure that adults cannot have sex with children. Those things are definitely there for a reason, to keep society safe. All right. So, now that we've talked about cheerleaders and nurses, I think that I'm always open for discussion. If you want to shoot me a comment, whatever, I will respond to it unless it's inappropriate, and I'll just remove it and have you reported. So feel free to. And until then, Auf Wiedersehen.